This is an after-school program podcast.
Welcome to the Home Studio Hangout podcast, where we explore what it's like building, running, and working out of a home studio with your hosts, Joshua Matotek, Andrew Simmons, and many guests in different areas of the music industry.
And welcome back to another episode of the Home Studio Hangout podcast. My name is Andrew Simmons. I'm going to be your host today, your sole host today. We're doing another solo episode. Josh is out doing his thing, and he's taking some time off this week. If you really enjoyed last week, the Nick Dewar episode, we were stoked to have him back, and we have another interview next week that I'm really excited for you to see. But today, I just actually finished reading, I want to say last week, I finished reading this book right here, Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon. I'm actually working on a YouTube video breaking down some really cool things that I found in this book that I think would be really cool for producers and mixing engineers and artists to know from this book. I highly recommend it. If you are on the YouTube, you could see it right there. See what it looks like. It's got a nice, cool little square form factor. It's a little different than what you would expect from a normal book. And then the inside of it has a really cool, like, bunch of different pictures and like artwork kind of in it. It's really, really, really an easy read. But I wanted to kind of go through some quick ideas of some things that I found, some things I took notes on, some things that really stuck out to me in this book about stealing like an artist. He says 10 things about being creative. These are just kind of things that he says that I've really pulled some other ideas out of, and I wanted to kind of relay them to you guys. So without further ado, we'll dive right into it. Number one, and I don't know how many of these I'm going to do, so we'll see. But the first one, and number one, is write what you like and not what you know. Now, this is a little counterintuitive to the idea of write what you know. And he says write because he's a writer. I would even change that wording to be make what you like, not what you know. Do what you like, not what you know. I think this is a little counterintuitive from what you've probably heard before, which is like, do what you know and see what happens. Well, I think that there's something to be said for trying to find your passion, because you know what you know and you know what you like. And sometimes that can be the same thing, which is really, really cool, but not always. And I think that you need to explore the thing that you like, because I think that you're going to have a lot more passion behind that thing. You can always combine the thing that you like and the thing that you know in a way that might be different. And maybe that's where you're going to find like your new niche or whatever. But he says, write what you like, or do or make what you like, not what you know, to explore that passion more, to give yourself an okay to make what you enjoy. Because if you enjoy it, it's going to be a lot easier to make it. So I'm actually going to read straight from the book here. He talks about seeing Jurassic Park. It came out on his 10th birthday, and he says he didn't know at the time. Because only the first one was out, he started continuing to write more stories about Jurassic Park when he was 10. And he said, I didn't know at the time, but I was writing what we now call fan fiction, fictional stories based on characters that already exist. 10-year-old me saved the story to a hard drive. A few years later, Jurassic Park 2 came out, and it sucked. And the sequel always sucked compared to the sequel in our heads. The question every young writer asks at some point is, what should I write? And the standard answer is, write what you know. This advice always leads to terrible stories in which nothing interesting happens. We make art because we like art. We're drawn to certain kinds of work because we're inspired by people doing that work. All fiction is, in fact, fiction. The best advice is to not write what you know, it's to write what you like. Write the kind of story you like best, write the story you would want to read. Or in our instance, I would say, make the music that you would want to hear, right? Do the thing that you would want to see done. The same principle applies to your life and career. Whenever you're at a loss for what move to make next, just ask yourself, what would make a better story? So let's take that and say, we're making the music that we want to see made. You're like, well, I have never heard this thing and this thing done before, and I really like. I've never heard jazz and uh, metalcore done together. And now I know that there is a band called Issues that does that. And there are a couple different bands that kind of do that thing now. But I've never heard that done before. Let's combine those and see what it makes. I like both of those things. Why would combining them not work, right? I see somewhere where this kind of specific music taste, adding this kind of synth or doing this kind of specific musical influence in another genre of music, of something, both things that I enjoy, but I see people not doing that. Why don't I try that? If it sucks, then it sucks, and that's fine. No one has to hear it. But if it's cool, then you've innovated in such a really interesting way. You can ask yourself, what would make a better song? What would make this production better? And yeah, I think that was a really interesting takeaway throughout the book. And he expands on that in a couple different ways after that, but I just wanted to read that excerpt for you. We'll probably be reading some random excerpts of some stuff that I found. So yeah, that's number one. Make what you like and not what you know. The second thing we're going to talk about is climb your own family tree. Now, quote, family tree. This idea is the idea of everybody has influences and everybody has, quote unquote, a family. You can't control who your physical family is because that's impossible. But what you can do is control who your influences are or who you look up to. So creating your own kind of family map, right? So I'll read a little bit of an excerpt in that frame of mind for you and kind of explain a little bit more after that. Okay. Marcel Duchamp said, "I don't believe in art. I believe in artists." This is actually a really good method for studying. If you try to devour the history of your discipline all at once, you'll choke. That's too much for you to handle. Instead, chew on one thinker. So thinker being a writer, an artist, an activist, or a role model that you have in your specific industry. Somebody that you really love. Study everything there is to know about that thinker or artist, but we're just going to call him a thinker. Then find 3 people that thinker loved and find out everything about them. Repeat this as many times as you can and, quote, climb up the tree as far as you can go. Once you build your tree, it's time to start your own branch. So what you're doing is you're finding somebody that you really enjoy as an artist or as a producer or as a mix engineer, and you're saying, all right, I really like this individual. Study that individual's entire catalog, entirety of their entire body of work and what they make. Then once you've done that, one person at a time, say, okay, who does that person enjoy? Who's somebody that really influenced this person? And you can even, from a musical standpoint, you can even say, what record by this first person that you're studying, what record is my favorite of theirs? Who influenced that record? And then find out who that influence was, and then study that person's entire body of work and study that person's influences. And then, like you see, it'll kind of start to branch off, and then Like the book said, pick 3 from each individual instance and study those 3 people's work. And as you see, it'll kind of branch off into a big tree, and you have so many influences to pull from that you will inevitably start making more, not only more interesting stuff, but more unique stuff to you, the more times that you kind of do this tree, family tree model of influence studying. I thought that was really interesting. I'm actually going to do this myself, I think in a video or maybe in a podcast at some point, where I take my top 3 influences as a producer and then go across some of their best work and then find their influences and expand on that. I just think that would be a really interesting video or conversation. But I think you should also do that. Literally get down with a piece of paper and write down maybe your number 1 influence. And then from there, study their whole body of work. Find that individual's top 3 influences that they cite the most. And then study those 3 influences. And then copy and paste all the way down until you've gotten yourself overwhelmed. But yeah, I find that as a really good exercise to not only branch yourself out into new music, but also invest in yourself as far as opening yourself up to new influences in a way that will make you better. Hey everyone, I wanted to tell you about a great company called That Pitch. Have you ever had some leftover song ideas you just didn't know what to do with? Or maybe you needed to flex that writing muscle, but you still need to get paid? Enter That Pitch, a sync licensing company that pitches your productions directly to their exclusive list of clients. That Pitch has already paid out over $120,000 to its members since October of 2020. They provide production advice, business training, and other resources to make your songs better. Go to thatpitch.com to sign up and use the code HANGOUT for 20% off your monthly or yearly subscription. Number 3. So number 1 being do what you like or make what you like, not what you know. Number 2 being climb your own, quote, family tree. And then number 3, we are going to go to make your brain uncomfortable. I distinctly remember this one being really, really good. This comes from a chapter called Leave Home. And this is about like getting out of your comfort zone. And so the idea being you need to put yourself in different situations to get you out of your comfort zone, make your brain uncomfortable, make yourself uncomfortable so that you make different stuff, so that you think differently, so that you approach whatever you're working on differently. If I'm working at home versus working at a studio in Atlanta or at a studio in Raleigh, I'm going to think differently naturally just because my location changes. I might do some of the same tendencies and stuff, but I'm going to just feel a little different being in a different space. Mentally, it makes my brain uncomfortable, right? So I'm going to read a little excerpt from this. It said, your brain gets too comfortable in your everyday surroundings. You need to make it uncomfortable. You need to spend some time in another land among people that do things differently from you. Travel makes the world look new. And when the world looks new, our brains work harder. The time I was lucky enough to spend living in Italy and England when I was 19 and 20 certainly changed my life, but I would note that a foreign culture isn't necessarily across the sea or in another country. For most folks who grew up where I grew up, Texas, might as well be Mars. If you know we need to leave home, where should we go? Where should we choose to live? There's a bunch of different factors to consider. Personally, I think bad weather leads to better art. You don't want to go outside, so you stay inside and work. When I lived in Cleveland, I got a lot of work done in the brutal months of winter. Down here in Texas, I get all of my work done in the brutal hot summers, which is about 6 months out of the year. If you know anything about those kind of areas, it's about the same amount of time. It helps to live around interesting people and not necessarily people that do what you do. And this is I'm going to stop reading right here and make a point of yes, and surround yourself with those kinds of people. Writers only hanging out with writers feels it gets a little bit of like a creative bubble where everything's just the same, right? Sometimes a songwriter needs to go work with a different producer. A producer needs to talk to a filmmaker or a videographer or somebody in as like a book writer or somebody who writes copy or somebody who writes children's books. As from a podcast perspective, I listen to a bunch of different podcasts from a bunch of different people, guys who do web development, guys who are, like I said, children's book writers or illustrators, people that do marketing. Like I try to surround myself and my knowledge getting pulled from a bunch of different places so that I feel refreshed, so that I feel like I'm coming up with new ideas. I'm pulling things from different places that aren't necessarily the music industry, so that when I take those things and I put it in the music industry, it's potentially something that has never happened before, or it gives me a new outlook on something that I might be struggling with or might be hitting a wall on. So I'm going to continue. I feel a little incestuous when I hang out with only writers and artists, so I enjoy the many filmmakers, musicians, and tech geeks who live in Austin. Oh, and food. The food should be good. You should have a place that feeds you creative, socially, spiritually, and literally. Even if you set up a new home, you need to leave it now and then, and at some point, you might need to just move on. The good news is nowadays, a lot of your peers are right where you left them on the internet. The biggest travel and easiest travel that you can do is on Google, on Twitter, on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram, in your social circles on the internet. Getting involved with groups and things like that will open you up to a bunch of different worldviews. But also, like I said, on podcasts, you're able to consume different worldviews, different points of view from a bunch of different aspects of new industries that you aren't necessarily in. And that'll open your mind to a bunch of new ways to approach your industry. And I think that is where I'm going to call it. Once again, this was a couple things that I wrote down from Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon. I think the book is like $15-20 online, or you could probably get it for like $5 or $10 on Kindle if that's your thing. I prefer the physical copy of this because, as you can see, if you're watching it, it's kind of square and really cool. Like I said, it's got really cool like artwork. It's a pretty short read, maybe like 140 pages, something like that. But it's extremely powerful. He's got multiple books. I'm super excited to dive into the next two. The next two being Show Your Work and Keep Going. They both sound really, really interesting. I've heard a lot of good things specifically about Show Your Work, so I'm really excited to dive into that book as well. But yeah, it's been 3 points. I guess I just did 3 because I have a couple more, but I haven't fully fleshed those ideas out yet. Those are the 3 more fleshed out ideas that I pulled from this book. Write what you like, or make what you like, not what you know. Climb your own family tree, make that family tree of influences, and then make your brain uncomfortable. Put yourself in mentally uncomfortable situations so that you can grow and bring new things back to your situation and your industry. Once again, guys, thank you so much for listening. Please follow us on Instagram at Home Studio Hangout. This is where we do the majority of our interactions. If you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to hit us up at Home Studio Hangout. If you're not subscribed yet on YouTube or on the podcasting platform, please do so. It'll help you stay up to date, get you new episodes. Next week, we have another incredible interview. I'm excited to share that one with you. And if you could take a second and give us a review on Apple Podcasts, honestly, that would be a huge help. It will push this podcast to new people, help everyone grow together, and give some new outlooks onto people that might need it. But yeah, thanks again for listening. We will see you next week. So keep on creating.